Welcome to Grant Writing Simplified with Teresa Huff. If you're a freelance grant writer, an aspiring grant writer, or wondering if a career in grant writing is right for you, you're in the right place. For more great resources on grant writing, head over to teresahuff.com. But before you do, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the great videos to come.
Bob, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to finally meet you and get a chance to sit down and visit. Tell us a random fact about yourself.
A random fact? Well, that I am an introvert, and very few people believe it until they get to know me, and then they realize I absolutely am.
As a fellow introvert, I can totally relate. I love it. So tell us a little bit about The Go-Giver, and your subtitle is A Unique Story About a Powerful Business Idea. And this little unique story has caused quite a stir. So give us a little bit of how you got to this point.
Well, thank you. The book itself is a business parable. So it's a work of fiction. It was co-authored by John David Mann, who I believe you're friends with as well. And he was really the lead writer, storyteller. I'm much more of a how-to guy. I'm step one, step two, step three. So I'm kind of boring, but John is, he's a great storyteller. And it's about a guy named Joe, who was a young, up and coming, ambitious, aggressive salesperson, good guy, but his focus was really on the wrong thing. It was on himself, and it was on what he needed to accomplish and what he needed. And the fact is, Teresa, that people don't do business with you because you have a quota to meet, right? They do business because they believe it's in their best interest to do business, and that might be financial, but it could be for many other reasons. And what Joe had to kind of learn was that shifting your focus is really the key, and that shifting your focus from getting to giving. And when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others. And that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's actually the most financially profitable way as well. But not for any kind of woo-woo, way out there, magical, mystical type of reasons. It actually makes very rational sense. And that, when you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on genuinely, authentically serving others, discovering what they need, what they want, what they desire, when helping them to solve their challenges, when moving your focus off yourself and onto helping them move closer to happiness, people feel good about you. They feel great about you. They want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They certainly want to tell others all about you. So that's really the premise of the book.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love how the principles are so applicable to so many different types of work or personal lives, relationships, all the pieces. And I find it interesting, even though you wrote it as a business book, there are a lot of nonprofit elements woven in, which a nonprofit is essentially a type of running a business.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is.
And so even with, if maybe a little different slant, but still, I really like that you wove both of those elements in. So I'd love to dig into that a little bit more, because some of these things you're saying also very much apply to trying to find donors and cultivate relationships and giving value, not just how can we get more money? How can we pay the bills? How can we get people to give? It's also about how can you turn that around?
Well, so it's the same when you bring this up. It's such a great point, because it's the same in any business. When you say, well, it's not just about, getting the donations, or it's not just, it's about, it's not focusing on those, because remember, the person who's the donor isn't doing it because you need the donations to keep your doors open. They're doing it because they have a reason for donating.
Yes.
And they have their own unique reason for doing that. And the salesperson, and yes, I'm going to say the person in nonprofit who's out there raising funds, is a salesperson. They are having to sell the idea as to why that person should donate and why it should be to this particular nonprofit. Okay. And now let's look at the term sales, though, because a lot of people, especially in the nonprofit field, and even in the for-profit field, they see sales as like a necessary evil. right? Something you have to do, you wish you didn't have to. Well, if you look at sales as trying to convince somebody to buy something they don't want or need, or donate to a cause they don't believe in, well, sure. But, that's not selling. That's called being a con artist, right? Trying to get them to do something they don't want to do, right? Selling is simply discovering what the other person does need, want, or desire, and helping them to get it. And when you look at sales in that frame, now you see it's something you can be very proud of. The old English root of the word sell was selan, which meant to give. So when you're selling, you are literally giving. Now, what are you giving? Well, you're giving time, attention, counsel, education, empathy, and most of all, value. Now, as a salesperson trying to help this other person decide to give to your nonprofit, okay, well, what are you giving them? They're really giving to you. Well, they're doing both. It's both, okay? But what you're giving them is an opportunity to do something that's congruent with their values, okay? So if this person is going to donate, let's say just because they want a tax break, well, that's their values. You're helping them to do it. If they're doing it because they want their name on a wall, okay, well, that's congruent with their values, and you're helping them to do that. If it's that they just want to feel as though they're making a big difference with a wonderful cause, well, that's their values, and you're helping them act accordingly with that. So, again, it's the salesperson's job to discover what is the other person's reason for making that donation.
I love that you put it in that context, because I think when you say salesperson, that probably strikes terror in a lot of people's hearts of thinking, no, I don't want to sell. But you're completely redefining that stereotype or the status quo of sales. You're saying this is about building a relationship and helping someone get what they need. And in nonprofit work, there are so many people who love a particular cause, but they can't pack up and go to Africa, or maybe their health doesn't allow them to volunteer at the food pantry or whatever it is. They just cannot get involved on the front lines at the level that they would like, but they do want to support in other ways.
Exactly. Yes.
So from what you're saying, you're helping make that connection from whatever they desire to the ways they can support that for whatever their reasons are.
For whatever their personal reasons are. Absolutely.
So it makes it so much less intimidating. And I'm reading The Go-Givers Sell More right now. And so that one is also just a very down-to-earth, approachable way of addressing this. And I really like how you're putting it in the nonprofit context.
Oh, thank you.
So how did this come about with your background to develop this? What led you to this point?
Well, I had a book out years ago called Endless Referrals, and the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts, into Sales. And this was published in the mid 90s. But it was a how-to book. It was a system basically for people who, entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought lots of value to those they served, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident going out into their neighborhoods and into their communities and developing the kinds of relationships that would cause people to want to do business with them and refer them to others. So Endless Referrals was a system for doing so. And we always had a lot of nonprofit people read that book as well, because again, the basic premise of that book is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. Well, it's the same in the nonprofit world. Before they donate to your nonprofit, they're first buying the person, so when they know, like, and trust that person, they're much more likely to donate. And so that's what Endless Referrals was about. But again, it was a how-to book. And I'd always read, since I'd been in sales, I'd always read parables and always enjoyed them because parables are stories, and stories tend to connect on a much deeper level, on a very much a heart level with people. And I know whenever I had read stories, whenever I'd read parables, whether it was Og Mandino's, greatest salesman in the world, or Klassen's richest man in Babylon, or in the late 70s, early 80s, Doctors Blanchard and Johnson, the 1 Minute Manager, in that whole line of 1 minute, that I always felt a real connection, with the authors, even if I didn't know them, and with the story, with the characters. So I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take this whole know, like, and trust premise and put it into a parable? So I reached out to John, who was at that time the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. I used to do a monthly column for them. And John, even back then, had this fantastic reputation as a brilliant writer and author. And he wasn't as well known back then as he certainly is now, but fortunately I knew who he was. So I asked, and he was the only one I wanted to write this with. And I asked him if I told him about this idea, the basic idea, outline, whatever. But it was when John came into the picture and we got together as co-authors that we really developed this into a story. And again, he was the lead writer, and we put together the five laws. And that's really how the book came about.
Mm-hmm. I really appreciate the parable approach, because when you mention the 5 laws, I can think through, and because of the characters in the parable, I remember the laws.
Yeah.
If you had given me a list, I may or may not have remembered it. It was a good book, but did I memorize them? Probably not. But I didn't have to memorize them because they're woven into the story.
Right. Exactly.
So that makes it much easier to apply the principles and go back to those. So how have you seen this creating a ripple effect? And I ask this because partly with the podcast, that's one of my goals. I can't write all the grants for all the causes, but I can teach others, and then they can go out and write their grants.
Sure,
so what are you seeing as a ripple effect from the Go-Giver?
Well, we love the idea that people saw the book as a way to, again, to bring up a term I talked about earlier, act according to their value system. Because, again, most people have this sort of backwards notion of sales. But, most people really want to do good for the world. And people who are who are entrepreneurs, people in sales, people in, grant writing and nonprofits and all those, they're doing it because they have a passion for it. They're doing it because they believe in it. And they know they're doing something good for the world. That doesn't mean it's just, just some altruistic, self-sacrificial type. Not at all. And that doesn't have to be. And that's one of the points of the book too. It's not an either or. It's not you're either a giver or a receiver. No, you're both. Mm-hmm. You're both. You focus on giving exceptional value to others, right? Making their lives better, doing good for. And you also receive in abundance, which you should. This is why John and I say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder, if you will, to value's lightning. But people wanted to feel like they could go out there and focus on the customer and still do well in business. And what John and I say is that's the only way you're going to do well consistently and sustainably is by focusing on that other person. Because remember, they're not buying for your reason, they're buying for their reason. So that salesperson who's able to really focus on the other person's reason, discovering that reason, and then, tying that together, tying the benefits of their offer with what the other person wants to accomplish, that's the person who's going to be successful. So, that's really kind of what we feel the feedback that we've gotten is it's allowed it's allowed people to work as they would like to work.
It's almost a permission to have both sides of the equation, to give and receive. Yes. And I like that you have created that more cycle of ecosystem, as opposed to just a one-way street.
Yeah, as we say, you've got to, and in the story at the end with Pindar and Joe, the protege, where he said, you can't just breathe out, right? You've got to breathe in as well.
Right.
Breathe out carbon dioxide, breathe in oxygen, breathe out, which is giving, breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're actually two sides of the very same coin, but that's not really the message we get from the world around us.
That's so true. We always hear you need to give, but nobody talks about the receiving side because that's maybe considered selfish, or you're just out for blood, or whatever the negative connotations are, but you're actually making it just a neutral, natural part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
And that's really with nonprofit work in particular, where I know so many nonprofit leaders that are just overwhelmed and so much going on and trying to work. They really need that encouragement, that just let the process come together and start that network and relationships, and then not be quite so paralyzed by the fear of, what do I do next? How do I raise money? How do I do this? Just kind of relax and enjoy the process.
Right. Very well stated. Again, have a game plan, control what you can control, right? The Stoics taught us that, right? Control what you can control, and work at that and do what you can with that, but don't be attached to what's out of your control.
Yes, exactly. And, I had seen on your website the phrase about how much fun, less stressful, and more profitable your business can be. And I really feel like that could be so true of nonprofit work as well, if we would just let it. And even grant writing, that's one reason I started some of my courses. Like, it doesn't have to be boring or stressful or overwhelming. We can have fun with it, and let's make it more fun.
And when it is, that's when it's more profitable, right? It's
exactly.
Our energy is in the right direction. You're absolutely right on the mark.
What would you suggest to either the overwhelmed nonprofit leader or a grant writer who is just feeling discouraged? And this sounds wonderful, to have fun, less stress. You're hitting the mark. You're hitting the pain points of what they are struggling with. So what would you say to encourage them to shift into that type of operation or means of working in the day-to-day? What would be a practical piece of advice?
Well, it comes down to, just like Nicole Martin, one of the mentors in the story, it comes down to making a decision. And I know that sounds simple to the point of simplistic, and maybe it is, but it really is that simple. You make a decision and you decide what it's going to be. Okay. Now, again, there's nothing magical or mystical about that. That doesn't mean you don't have a game plan. It doesn't mean you don't learn what to do and learn how to do it. And, coaches such as you are what help to put those plans into action. You take control of what you can control. And you decide it's going to be joyous. Now, it doesn't mean everything about it is unicorns and rainbows, as they say. Life is life, okay? But it's a general attitude. It's a general way of looking at the world. It's a general way of seeing the world. In his wonderful 1910 classic, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace D. Wattles talked about living on the creative plane as opposed to the competitive plane. That doesn't mean there's no competition. It doesn't mean people aren't out there trying to get the same grant money or the same donation. Of course they are. And you can be aware of them, and that's fine. But your focus is on creating value, right? And so when that's your focus, you tend to live more in joy.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And that really does, that helps kind of quantify and bring it back around of where is our attention. And what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the negative potential things that could happen? Or are we focusing on, I can't change how other people are acting, but I can change my attitude or how I treat. And people tend to respond in the way we treat them. So it creates a back and forth cycle. And to some extent, like you said, we can decide what is that cycle going to be like.
Yeah. And we look at something like positive intention or positive expectation, let's say, when dealing with another person. Okay. And we say, so Berg, are you just saying, just expect that person to be helpful and nice and kind and everything, and they will be? That's not what I'm saying. Okay. Your positive expectation isn't going to change them. Your positive expectation is going to change you.
Right.
And that's what changes them, because when you go in there expecting them to be defensive and horrible and cheap and ugly and everything, well, you're gonna act as though that's who they are. That's what you're expecting, and they're gonna pick up on that energy. And you go in there expecting them to be kind and generous and wonderful and loving and all those things, and the chances are you're transferring that to that person. How do you act when someone is like that? Well, you're grateful. You have a smile on your face. It's from the heart going out, into out, inside out, and all that. People pick up on that energy. Now, again, that doesn't mean you're going to have the sale every time. It doesn't mean they're going to donate every time. It doesn't mean you're going to no, of course not. But you're increasing the odds, certainly, because that is your expectation. You're changing you, and doing that is what creates that, what we call benevolent context for success.
Exactly. I love that you are making this. It's not about woo-woo or what can I create
Right.
or make other people do. It's nothing like that. It's more about, how are you controlling your attitude? How are you reacting to their attitudes? And how are you choosing to act regardless of the things they're doing?
Exactly.
And that could really affect workplace dynamics as well, on teams and families. I mean,
and also,
everywhere.
There's a wonderful book that I'd like to suggest. It's also a parable, actually. It was written, I think, about a year after The Go-Giver, and it's called Go for No. And it's by a husband and wife team, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton. GOFORNO.com is their website. I think they've got them now for different industries, but their original one, the parable, it was about a copying machine salesperson who learned how to totally reframe no's so that they were working for him as opposed to against him. It's a short little book. It's one I wish they had written 40 years ago when I first got into sales, because it was just so, it's just so fantastic. But it's a book that really helps you reframe. It doesn't mean you have to like no's. That's not the point, but it's how we deal with them. And it's how we use those no's in order to propel us. The subtitle and their basic premise is that yes is the destination, no is how you get there.
Instead of seeing it as a door slamming in your face or a completely discouraging, maybe I should just give up. Instead, it's just, okay, this is a stepping stone.
Exactly. And the way they do it really, in the story, really equips you. You come away saying, oh, I can't wait to go out there and get those no's, because I know I'm closer to getting the yeses.
That's really encouraging in the light of fundraising and grant writing, especially because that's a part of it. We're not going to win every grant. That's normal.
Any sales. Exactly. Yes. And that's where we say it's and I can't tell you how many, nonprofit people I've spoken with say, of course it's sales. It's absolutely sales. It's like you said, it's building relationships. It's going out there and it's presenting your case and doing it in terms of how the other person's going to benefit. And it's sales. And that's a good thing.
Right. Yes. And I think the more we talk about it and address it in just normal everyday terms, the more it can become less intimidating and just more doable. Like, here are just some tools. You're meeting people and helping them. And the people in nonprofit work overwhelmingly seem to have servants' hearts, and they care about others. They're there because of this wonderful cause and the mission.
Absolutely.
So if they can also transfer that into the process of, like you're saying, the sales, but really the relationships and the network, and then it becomes just more natural and a part of the work they're doing anyway.
Yeah. And, when you're having more joy in what you're doing, when you're happier with what you're doing, it's more attractive.
Absolutely.
And they also know that you're someone who is successful at what you're doing, and people like to do business with successful people. Right.
Yes. So when you're sincere and truly care about the person as well. So, yeah. Well, what is one of your favorite pieces about this Go-Giver concept? Do you have a favorite thing either about the book or the concept in general?
Um, I think it's the good feeling of knowing that the more you take your focus off yourself, there's less pressure on you, and it's actually more effective since the other person is happy to be, to have the focus on them.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you first meet someone. Let's say you meet a business person, and rather than talking about, and you ask them what they do and they tell you and they ask what you do, rather than going into the big thing about your cause, which is going to then all of a sudden make that person defensive, right? What if instead you just, and I'm saying you've met them at some event or some, what if instead you focused on them and asked them how they got started as a so-and-so, in their business. And you're one of the few people that has actually ever asked that person to share their story with you. Right? What if you say to that person after that answer, wow, you must have had some fascinating experiences. What do you enjoy most about your work? Again, you're asking questions that just make this person feel good about themselves, thus good about you. What if you say to this person, if they're in sales, and you ask what I call the one key question, which is, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is a good prospective client for you? Or if they're not in sales necessarily, you might say, how can I know if someone I'm speaking with is someone you'd like to meet or would be a good connection with you? And you see how you're, rather than you spewing out information about your cause, you're focused on them. You're the person they want to get to know more about.
As an introvert, that sounds like such a relief. Like,
It
I
is.
can
Yes,
totally ask questions and I love to listen.
that's why I believe introverts have a decided advantage over extroverts. Extroverts might like the process more of a conversation, but introverts have more effective customer conversations because we want to ask questions and listen. And
we like to go deep.
Go deep. Yep.
We can go deep pretty fast sometimes. I love that. And, even in a nonprofit role, they can still ask those questions. That probably doesn't occur to fundraisers sometimes, to also ask a donor, how can I make connections for you?
And here's how you do this. You lead in, you frame it with, I always love connecting good people with other good people. How can I know if someone I'm speaking with would be a great connection for you?
I love that. And that is such from a place of service and truly caring.
Exactly. And then the best thing you do is make those connections.
Right.
Within
Follow
the
up.
ecosystem of the best thing you can do, be that kind of resource in your sphere. Right. Become, instead of just being part of a sphere of influence, be that center of influence.
Absolutely. And what you said earlier about make the decision, that is something that we can decide. And I feel like deciding consistently is the key of just, you can't try it a time or two and say, well, that didn't work.
Oh, that didn't work. Right. Yeah. Don't do that. Make the decision. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I know that's been a big key just in, like, with grant writing, you've got to be consistent. You've got to get back to it. Nonprofit work, if you were just to give up, well, the nonprofit's not taking off, nobody's donating, forget it. But
nothing gets built that way.
Exactly.
Things that get built big typically don't happen fast. They happen with consistent, persistent work.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Well, this has been so helpful, and I appreciate all the great resources you've shared. I will link to those books in the show notes. What is something that has been meaningful to you in your journey?
Well, right now, my business partner, Kathy Tajanel, and I have put together something called the Go-Giver Community Network. And we are just so excited. I always say, think Facebook, but just for go-givers. So you've got all these people, right, who are just looking to bring value to others, as well as being open to receiving value from others. So we have that set up at the Go-Giver, without the hyphen, thegogivercommunity.com. And they can also find it at burg.com. But that's what we're doing right now. And it is so much fun.
It sounds like it. I've been kind of eyeing that, so I may have to come give it a try.
I'd love you to.
That's amazing. Well, I will link to all these things in the show notes, and I'll certainly link to the community and really encourage people to check out the community and especially the book series as well. And the principles are so incredibly practical. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and encouragement. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for all the great work you're doing.